Hey guys, Chicky the Main, aka Debu.com with a video surf forecast update. This forecast update brought to you by Nasara Paradise Rentals. Planning your next trip to Costa Rica? Stay with Nasara Paradise Rentals, Nasara, Costa Rica. Remember, there's no sorrow when you stay in Nosara. NasaraParadiseRentals.com. Start you off in the southeast Gulf of Mexico off the southwest Florida coast. And before we switch over to a look at last night's run of the models, wanted to show you some stuff in the visible satellite imagery and to show you how we compare what we see in the satellite imagery and also what we see in the forecast model runs. And over here off the southwest Florida coast, we are monitoring this little cyclonic spin that's up in here. Now, the Canadian model in the last night run was showing an area depicted just off the Cuban coast, and this was going to track off towards the west-northwest, and the Canadian model is hinting that it wants to develop this into a depression. Now, this could, if the forecast holds true, enhance some surf conditions for the Panhandle beaches this weekend, as a predominantly southerly flow could develop between shifting high pressure and the gradient between a developing area of low pressure. So this is something that we're going to be watching here for the rest of the day to see what happens and compare it to how the Canadian model handles its forecast in the afternoon run. Shifting you over just a bit towards the Florida East Coast and towards South Florida, we still have some convection firing up here. We've had convection firing over the last several days, giving South Florida some very heavy rainfalls. South Florida over the last couple of weeks has just been getting rain after rain after rain, and I believe they're upwards towards 18 to 20 inches above average for this year so far. So they've been pretty wet. But the GFS, which is the other model that we follow, is forecasting for an area of low pressure to come up out of here and ride up the Florida East Coast and then come up towards the northeast Florida coast. This should increase the rain chance probability this weekend, and there's possibly going to be some heavy rains into northeast Florida as all of this is going to be shifting towards the west-northwest. So here's a look at the global forecast system, the GFS, and as you can see, we've got the tan shading clear across the tip of Cuba all the way back over here towards the Bahamas. And watch how this tan shading indicating some lower pressures and convection. And as we move through the forecast, that's for Thursday, and you see how it begins to lift it off towards the north. And then on Thursday afternoon, it kind of puts a little dot on the map right there off central Florida. And then as we get in towards Friday, and then it moves it over northeast Florida. Now, again, we'll back this up for you, just kind of give you the idea there. Now, if it's not going to give us any surf, it doesn't look like anyway. We might get a little southerly suck-up swell as high pressure shifts and the wind shifts from southeast to south and then off to the southwest in the forecast. So although the swell is going to be small, the southwest winds should clean it up and should be some fun longboard waves, even though it might be knee to waist high. So here's a look at the Canadian model, and as we mentioned when we were looking at the visible satellite imagery off the southwest Florida coast, you see how the Canadian model depicts this little tan shading off the western tip of Cuba. Now watch what happens as it progresses through this run. You'll see that it starts to shift this off towards the west and just north of the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula on Thursday, and then as we get into Friday, you'll see how it lifts it into the northwest Gulf of Mexico and starting to deepen the pressure a little bit. Then when we get in here on Friday and Saturday, you see how with the high pressure shifting into the Atlantic and the low pressure there, how the fetch comes more out of the south in there. Okay, well, if we can get this low pressure to actually develop and then be a little bit further east than where the CMC is depicting it, this will increase the southerly fetch into the Panhandle beaches, increasing wind and seas and elevating the surf. here's what we're going to be looking at for next week. This image is for Saturday. This is out of the Tropical Atlantic Forecast branch, showing two tropical waves, one off the coast of Haiti and another one approaching the backside of Puerto Rico. Now, what's interesting to note is that in previous forecast runs, they had both of these tropical waves in here south of Puerto Rico and south of Hispaniola. They have now moved those up towards the north a little bit, and it's the northern extension of this second one that we're going to be watching for a possible increase in surf conditions next week. It's the northern extension and the wave energy that's associated with the tropical wave that can enhance some surf for Central Florida on up into the Georgia coast. Now, the negative is going to be the southerly wind flow as the winds shift to the south. As you can see, the arrows depicting the southerly winds, creating more of a little southerly wind swell blowing into South Carolina and the Georgia coast and up in here towards the Outer Banks. But primarily, the Atlantic is covered in a southeast swell north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. So we're hoping that as the winds switch to the southwest, we get a little bit of an 8 to 9 second ground swell period. Hopefully that northern extension of that tropical wave will enhance the season here, and we could see some fun longboard surf showing up probably Monday or Tuesday of next week. Stay tuned to the forecast.